Welcome to the Mom as Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here. Mama's Well. Yes, she is. Hey guys, welcome to Mom as Well. If you are new to the podcast, thanks for showing up. Let me tell you what we're about. We are about, well, I'll tell you what I'm about. I am a parent who is learning to reparent some places in herself. I am unlearning some things that I thought I knew. And my kids are the little people that are teaching me this. They are showing up in my lives and pointing out things that need healing. And in that process, we are growing together, and we are becoming more comfortable in our humanness. We are becoming more comfortable in our connection. And every single time I sit down with a guest on this podcast, I just uncover more and more about myself, and it is a beautiful process. And so today's guest, I don't believe in accidents, but it felt so accidental that we met and we struck up a conversation, and we found out we had so many things in common and so much of the same passion that was growing in our hearts, and that all of that passion revolves around kids who are struggling and kids who are at risk. And my guest today works with children young people, young adults, young kids who are in residential treatment centers. They have been in many, many placements. They have been in and out of juvenile detention centers. They are at risk as at risk gets. And she goes in and she trains churches to mentor these kids. She works with people. She trains them in Tbri, which is trust-based relational intervention. And she works with people and teaches them how to work with kids. And it is quite an incredible story. And I can't wait for you to hear from her today. It's called the Champion Project, and she's going to tell you all about that. But before I go on any longer, welcome Audra Simpson.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm really glad that you are, and I'm really glad that we met the other night. And I don't really believe in accidents, so I'm sure this is going to go deeper even still. Tell us a little bit. You are involved in a whole lot of things that I was just blown away when I listened to you. But first, just start off a little bit about yourself, your family. Start there.
Yeah, I have been married for 18 years to a wonderful man. I have 2 children, 16-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son, and a very large extended family that I am very grateful for and I love with all my heart. And we are not without our own dysfunction, but I still have been very blessed, I think, on that side of things. And so I think when I was pregnant with my son, he's 13 now. Mm-hmm. I remember being in this place where I thought things would look different. I think for a large majority of my 20s, I was kind of chasing things that I thought would make me happy, right? Success and achievement and all of these things, whether it's academically or professionally or even in sports and things like that. And I kind of get to this place where I think, Audra, on paper, it looks like you've got everything that should really make you happy. And I still had this kind of empty feeling, I would say, and I knew something was missing. And so I remember praying at that time, hey, God, I'm so grateful for everything that you've given me. And I don't know where this feeling of emptiness is, but I don't really know what my purpose in this world is and what my passion in this world is. And so I'm just going to be in the season of saying yes. I'm just going to say yes to some things. And so I want you to open doors and put things out there. And so I think the next several years, that's what it was. It was just kind of saying yes. And the very first thing was to CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates. And I did that in Montgomery County. And that's a wonderful program where I learned a lot about CPS and the way that things work and the way that kids come into the system and get placed and how sometimes they get stuck. Around the same time, there was a notice at our church that there was a new program opening for kids that had aged out of foster care, and it was a transitional living program called Angel Reach. Many of the listeners probably know about it. It also is an incredible program. And so I remember going to Target and buying some things from that list, and I went and took them over there, and they were in the very early stages, and so there were just some boys over there, and the executive director at the time was there, and I just kind of started asking questions. I took the things over, asked some questions, and there was a boy trying to take the GED, and so he needed a little bit of help, and so I'd offered to come back and help him, and they needed some help getting kids to school and to work and things like that, so I would help with that, and taught some life skills, and the program started to grow, and I was just filling in gaps and at the same time doing some CASA advocacy. And I think through all of it, my very favorite thing and what I did most of was just talk to kids, listen to stories, talk about things they had been through and ways that they had been hurt and ways that they're healing and dreams that they have. And you just listen to these things that are, if you've never been in that world, incredibly tough to listen to. Stories that are incredibly hard to imagine growing up in that way in your own families, and then having to be in foster care. And most of these kids were living in congregate care facilities and group homes and residential treatment centers, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. But, through that, just meeting some really great people, other organizations in Montgomery County. There are so many organizations here that serve children in different ways just so well, and met a girl who I eventually would co-found the Champion Project with. Her name is Elizabeth Chappell, and she was kind of doing some of the same things, volunteering in different aspects and getting to know some kids who are in foster care. And we met and originally started in 2016 an organization called We Will Speak, and some of the youth that had aged out of care, we were working with them to help articulate their stories, and they were telling their stories in churches and even CPS new hire meetings and to people who were court-appointed special advocates for kids, and it was really powerful. A lot of people kind of got involved and were becoming aware of what life was like for some of these kids. And as you keep doing this, it just becomes increasingly difficult to look at these kids and hear their stories, and all you have that you can do is to say, hey, I'm really sorry. We just have a broken system, right? And so you just keep thinking about, how do we change this, right? And even looking at the Desmond Tutu quote, right? We keep pulling people out of the water, and we've got to find out how they're getting in the first place. And so, I think for me, it's just been kind of doing the next thing. Yeah. And I've been super blessed to meet a lot of incredible people along the way, and I ask a whole lot of questions, and I feel like I'm constantly learning something new, which I love.
Yeah. So I want to backtrack a little bit. You basically, let me just make sure I get this. Yeah. You're basically just having this feeling inside you that there's got to be something more.
Yeah.
Like you're comfortable, you're pregnant with your first child, or is that right? Second child, yeah. And you're like, okay, but there's something more.
Yeah.
And so then you just said you're going to say yes. You start saying yes, and it landed you in a space with some kids who things were not comfortable. Like they don't have parents. Right. They don't have people in their lives that are protecting them and pouring into them. And obviously that lit your passion. Yeah. Like it hit something inside you, which is what spurred our conversation, right? Yeah. We started talking about this. And you just, I didn't mention in the intro about the Champion Project. Yeah. Would you tell us, you said that you were a co-founder of this. All of this kind of led to what you're doing right now.
Absolutely. Okay,
the Champion Project. Right,
absolutely.
So tell us about the Champion Project.
Okay, so before I do that, I don't know if all the listeners are familiar, but there are probably almost 50,000 kids in foster care in the state of Texas. And of those, about 3,500 of them will live outside of traditional foster homes in congregate care is sort of what it's referred to, but that would be group homes, residential treatment centers. And these are the kids that are kind of bouncing in and out of juvenile detention and psychiatric hospitals. And of course, now we have this massive issue with children without placement, CWOP. I don't know if you've heard on the news about kids sleeping in offices and hotels. And so there's this population of kids, which are the kids that I ended up meeting at Angel Reach, right? That will kind of bounce around from place to place. And so it's interesting because the state has done all this research, and they know that the best predictor of success for these kids is the number of stable adult relationships that they have when they leave care. Well, so many of these kids that I worked with didn't have a single person. They just didn't have anybody. And so Elizabeth and I started looking at, hey, how can we get people into these kids' lives that can just show up and be a stable, consistent presence for them, right? And we know when you look at all these other programs, Kairos Prison Ministry, and the number of volunteers where people really care and they're going in and they're doing that, we know we can get those volunteers. It's just, hey, how do we do that? And how do we work in a system where, the state is responsible for these kids? And so they're typically very hesitant to allow people that don't work for them to come in. But we know there was a federal lawsuit in 2015, and a federal judge said to the state of Texas, hey, a lot of these kids are largely worse off leaving the system than when they came in. And so the state is now kind of looking for ways to engage some faith-based collaboration, things like that. So that's how the Champion Project was founded. And so basically what we do is we engage churches and we connect churches with homes that are close to them. And we basically go in and provide, it's more of a group mentoring program for a lot of reasons, but we just provide these kids with the ability to have stable, healthy connections with adults that really care about them.
Yeah. You are also a TBRI practitioner, right?
Yes.
So, and TBRI is Trust-Based Relational Intervention by Dr. Karen Purvis and Dr. Cross, right, from TCU. We've talked about that a lot on the podcast. Do you train your mentors in TBRI principles, or
Absolutely.
How does that work?
That's a requirement, actually, of our being a mentor in our program, is that you have TBRI training. And I think historically that's one of the problems, right? These kids have gone through so much and they've been so traumatized that there are really well-intentioned, good-hearted people that want to go in and help them. But if we're not aware of the things that they've been through and what that looks like for them behaviorally and what that does to their brains, if we don't know that, then it's hard for people to go in because they see that and then they go, well, this is too much for me. I can't do this. And then they leave. And that's just another traumatic event. It's just another time that a child feels like they've been abandoned. And so that's a huge piece. Training is a big piece of our program to help people understand and give people the freedom during training to say, hey, if this is too much for you, it's okay to not continue. We just don't want you to go in and be introduced to these kids and then have to leave because it's too much.
Yeah. So what are, when you think of mentors, okay, I think of a mentor is someone, you can trust.
Yes.
Someone who's listening to you, someone who's kind of leading almost by example in a way. They're not necessarily coaching or telling you what to do. They're just a mentor is kind of someone that in my opinion, you're watching. Right?
Yes.
Tell me when you think of mentor and when you're teaching, how do we mentor? What does that look like? What are those principles?
So our biggest ask of our mentors is that you just show up and love and encourage kids. Okay. And I think one of the things that we really articulate is that we cannot go in there with a posture of trying to fix kids. And that's countercultural, right? Because we all look at it and we can see very clearly, hey, if you will just do X, Y, and Z, your life would be so much better, easier, whatever it is. But we have to keep in mind that this is a population of kids that are living in settings where they just don't have the option and the ability to have a conversation, to have a normal relationship and to connect with people, because the staff that's taking care of them, they have 14 other kids to take care of, right? And so these kids they have their caseworkers that are telling them what to do. They have their staff that are telling them what to do. They have teachers that are telling them what to do. Rarely do they ever get to sit down with somebody and just say, hey, how are you? What's on your mind? What's on your heart? Tell me how you're feeling. They don't get that, and they almost don't know what to do with it. And so for us, that is one of our biggest components. Hey, we all take the pressure off yourself. All we need you to do is go in and love kids.
Yeah. So when you and I were having this conversation, and you were telling me about what you do and how you go in, and you just, the word that comes to mind is just being with somebody and seeing them, like being and seeing.
Yes.
Is kind of what showed up for me. Something happens as a parent, because I get that. And I am so good at that, with other people's children. I have a lot of young adults in my life that like to be around me and that want to hear from me, right? They want to know what I think.
Yes.
But there's this something that happens in our own families with our own kids that's no.
Right.
The wall goes up. I don't want to hear it. I don't even care, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be fixed, and I don't want to be told how to do it.
Right.
What is that?
I don't know, but I'm going to say to you, same, sister, same,
Yeah.
right? It's interesting because I feel like I have all the patience in the world, and with these kids that I work with and young adults that I work with outside of my own household, but I have the same issue with my own kids. And, the tendency is a lot higher, I guess, to want to fix my own kids, right? And try to, because I understand, I know what their life is like. And so much of working with kids outside of my household is listening to them and understanding where they're coming from and why they want something. And, so much of our time at home, it's busy and, hey, this is what you need to do, and I know you need to do this, so go ahead and get it done. And I think it is difficult, but I do think, there was a moment for me when my daughter was probably 4 years ago or something, and I was trying to connect with her, and I just said, hey, why won't you talk to me? And she said, well, because every time I try to tell you something, you just want to tell me how to fix it or tell me that what I did was wrong. And she was right. I do that with my own children, and I'm so good at not doing that with the kids that I work with. And so I think, for me, that's a function of trying to back out of that and just trying to remember, hey, the most important thing here is connection. And so I need to do better at listening. I need to do better at not worrying so much about the outcome in my own children. But that's really a tough thing to do.
Yeah, and that's really why I wanted you to come here and talk about it. There's two reasons. I want to bring awareness to Champion Project. I want to bring awareness that there are kids sleeping in offices. Yeah. There are kids that are living in residential treatment centers. There are kids that feel completely alone and that nobody understands them. They have zero sense of belonging. There are kids that don't even know what the meaning of trust or love or relationship is. Yeah. And that's what you're doing. And then the second thing, because we're talking to parents who aren't mentoring children as much as parenting children, how do we somehow take off what can feel, and I hate to use this word because it sounds derogatory, but burden of responsibility for the child for long enough moments to just be there with the child. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult thing. And I mean, we had this conversation. Yeah. I feel so ill-equipped to speak to foster parents because that's just such a huge job, right? I mean, that's such a hard thing to figure out. And so on so many levels, it's easier as a mentor to go in and say, hey, we can do these things for a certain amount of time and when kids call us and need us. But when you're 24 hours a day, you're taking care of a family member, and that's a different thing. Yeah. And so I think I would say it's very much being intentional about it and going into it. And I often step back and try to ask myself, hey, what is the goal, right? I can lose my mind over a 0 in a grade book. And what is my goal? Why? And so I think I have to step back and look at myself, why I am so affected by that, right? And go back to knowing what works with the kids that we serve, right? Knowing that there's so much power in just listening and asking questions that allow them to talk about the way that they're feeling and why that might happen. And
Being
I think
curious.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think also trying to connect with them outside of the things that we need or want them to do, right? Life gets so busy. We've got so much going on, and it just seems like I get in these moments where I feel like I'm just always telling my kids, do this, do that, don't do this. It's time to go here. It's time to do there. But when we can really sit down and play a game, during the pandemic, we did really good with getting a board game, getting a card game, playing basketball outside, and just really, and I think we talked about this before, play disarms fear, right? And so it's impossible for a kid to be playing and laughing and feel fear at the same time. And for so many of these kids from hard places, this behavior is fear-based, and we don't always see it that way. We, a lot of times we'll see that as disobedience, but a lot of it is fear-based. And so I think if we can get to the bottom of what is it that you're afraid of, and sometimes the best way to do that is to start from a posture of play, right? To disarm that, and then approach the conversation where we're already in a place where we're not fearful, and then we can have a little bit more of an open conversation. And, I think in our culture of performance and achievement, we want things to be efficient. And so we want it to be, and as a parent, I want that to be too. This is very simple. Why are you making this so difficult?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But life is difficult. Brokenness is difficult. Connection is difficult. And so I think in any place where we can work to connect with our kids outside of something that we're trying to get done, it's really powerful. And I also think it's really beneficial to try to connect our kids with other people that can give them some of the things that no matter how good of a parent we are, we can't always give to them, right? And so, for my kids and my daughter specifically, that looks like a small group leader at church. That looks like my mother-in-law, who she's very close with. And I think to promote those relationships and facilitate those relationships where they're finding connection there and they are learning skills there that they can also use in the relationships that we have with them is really powerful. And sometimes that's a hard thing to do too, but I think it's a valuable thing, right?
Yeah, you said, we're in care for 24 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
But what if we just put on the mentoring hat for just an hour a day?
Yeah.
Or 20 minutes a day, But what you just said, that really, I told you the story, and I just had another idea while you're sitting here talking. I told you, so we met on a Sunday. On the Monday following our meeting, I had a light bulb after a very horrible day, trauma responses from my daughter, from myself. It was just a bad day. I decided it was a home day for our school, and I decided that I wasn't going to be able to meet that need for my daughter. And I hired a young 18-year-old friend of my son's who's amazing, and they've already started working together, and they do great. But what you just said, so often we want to mentor for our kids when we recognize, oh my gosh, they've got a problem.
Right.
Oh my gosh, they've got a problem. But what if we are all along the way creating these relationships? What if instead of just the babysitter comes over, I say, hey, Madison, how about you and Trinity go to a movie? Here's some money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what if we start to play a little more defensively, a little more proactively? And start creating and setting up these relationships, because we can't do it all.
That's right.
I think, this is, my brain is just like exploding here. But
I love it.
It used to be that years and years and years ago, we lived in villages.
Right.
Right? We had people that were really good at play.
Yes.
You had Uncle, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a village name. But somebody like he's out playing soccer with all the kids, like in Haiti.
Yeah.
In Haiti, where my son lived, there's kids out playing soccer, and there's certain people in the village that are really good at soccer.
Right.
Older boys, men, and they're out there playing with the kids. And guess what? The moms aren't. They're doing what they have to do. And I thought, we don't have that in our families.
Right. I love that village mentality because the truth is we all have gifts and we all have deficiencies. And sometimes we work well with other people who have different gifts and deficiencies, and sometimes we don't. And so I think the value in the opportunity to know a lot of different people, which ironically is part of the reason that we do group mentoring, right? Because if you try to pair people one-on-one and they haven't really chosen that and they don't know each other well, it doesn't always work. And it's always pretty surprising because naturally there's a gravitation, right, for youth and kids and for adults. And it's just always interesting to see how that works out because sometimes just looking at a kid and knowing their personality, you wouldn't think that they would gravitate towards a certain personality. And so I think in my own family, that's been a part of my work in knowing myself better and what my gifts are and what my deficiencies are. And I think there's power in articulating those things to our kids, right? I'm trying really hard and I realize that you have this need and I'm trying to meet it. And that's not really something that is strong in my personality. And so I want you to know I'm trying and I'm really working on it. And I think that's powerful too, right? For kids and for people to understand we're just not perfect. We're going to, just like Adam said last week on the last week's podcast, right? We are going to disappoint you. We are going to be disappointed. And how can we connect and move through that instead of getting stuck and not communicating?
Yeah. And if you missed Adam's podcast, it was podcast, I think 69, around then. It was Adam Bertosh. Oshkosh Bertosh. Anyway, he's great. That was a great episode of recognizing that we will disappoint people and we will be disappointed. That's right. Really important. You've just, again, our conversation on Sunday spurred something that helped me, and it just happened again. And it's setting up, I am not my daughter's girl for teaching. And you know what? That was a pride swallowing moment for me because I am a teacher. I am trained in this and I do this well with other people, but I was not helpful to her. And a matter of fact, it was harmful to her. And to say that hurts me. But now I can let that go and I can find somebody that is helpful to her.
Yes. And it's going to long-term be better for you and for her. And we all learn differently, right? And so I think even in a mentoring relationship, those are kind of connections that there's sometimes that you realize, hey, there's going to be someone else that can probably help you a little bit more and walk with you in a way that speaks to you more than maybe I would. And that doesn't mean that as people we're failures or we're bad. It just means that there's such a blessing and a benefit in being able to step back and have that self-awareness to say, hey, I think this is really something that would work out best for everybody. And then the time that you do spend together is quality time, and there's a lot more connection and a lot more positive and a lot less of the stuff that was really hard to deal with.
I thought that you and I were going to sit here and talk about how we as moms could put on a mentoring hat better, how we could do it better. But I think what's getting really clear to me right now in this moment is that is not what I need to do. I need to recognize my gifts and in my areas that I'm gifted and that I am connecting well with the people in my life, and then the areas that I'm not, and help them find somebody that can. That's what I think. Because maybe we weren't designed that. Maybe just like a father and a mother have different roles in a child's life. There needs to be a bigger village.
And I think there's some power in helping kids look through that, right? And being self-aware, and it's a little bit harder when they're younger, and knowing, how they learn and how they process things and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. Because the truth is, in life, we have to deal with all kinds of people. And so it's incredibly beneficial to understand what works and what doesn't and what's hard for you and why it's hard. And so, and I think there's another interesting thing there with our own children, and we talked a little bit about this, and kind of being known, right? And so where I think a lot of the kids that we work with, in foster care struggle to be known because they just don't have the opportunity. There's not people that are sitting with them and asking the questions, and where our kids, I think, seemingly have that ability in a lot of different areas. But I think there's just so much pressure on kids to be all the things that their parents want them to be and their friends want them to be and social media wants them to be, that I think if we can facilitate them processing who God created them to be and what their gifts are outside of what they think we want them to be or what would make them popular, and help them facilitate those things, I think that also is a way to connect and help them grow and, not feel like they have to be something just because they think that that's who we want them to be.
Right. Yeah. And as parents, we unknowingly, unconsciously project that.
Sure.
Unless we're really in touch and we're really aware, we can easily project our wants and our needs and our desires onto our child.
And it's a loving thing, right? That's not out of love. We want what's best for our child. And so often that, just looks like success and achievement because that's just what culturally, right, that's what it is, and it's not bad. Mm-hmm. But I just think that puts a lot of pressure on kids, and a lot of times they don't know what to do with that pressure. Mm-hmm. And so it sometimes falls apart and they cave under it. But I think what it does do is it drives sort of disconnection when they feel like they can't come to us with their authentic selves because they're afraid it won't be accepted or good enough. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Oh, this is good stuff, and I hadn't even looked at my notes yet. You've already mentioned this, but I think that it's important to bring up again is, and it goes back to the whole fixing thing and that pressure that we feel as a parent. And maybe it's because we're looking down the road and we're making up stories about what this could, we don't know, but we think we do. But you talked about sitting with a kid one time, and I'm sure like when you first started this, you sit there and you're like, oh my gosh, well, I've got this and I've got this and I can help him with this and I can help him with this. And then I could just imagine that it's all of a sudden like, you're taking this child on to raise, instead of recognizing that your time is this.
Yeah.
So what happened? You talked about a story where you were sitting with a kid and you had a light bulb.
Yeah. I think several years in, I was meeting with this particular young adult, and she was doing really, really well. And then she kind of backtracked a lot. And I remember just praying, like, God, what am I even doing here? Am I even helping? I've invested this time, and I care about her deeply, and I don't know if what I'm doing is even helping. And, I'm not a person that believes I hear the audible voice of God, but more clearly than I've ever heard God say anything, he just said, Audra, I'm not asking you to fix them. I'm asking you to love them. And that was incredibly powerful for me, because I also am a person that is a little bit results oriented, and I felt like I needed to see some benefit, not for me, right, but for like am I helping? Am I really helping anything? And so there was such a peace with that, and I think that's why we feel so strongly now moving forward about we can't control the outcomes. And it's interesting because a lot of times when the world looks at the success and when people are evaluating programs and they want to hear the success stories, right? That's always a very interesting thing to me, because again, culturally, we want to hear that, this kid beat the odds and they went to medical school and now they're a doctor and they're saving all these people's lives. But a lot of times success looks like they beat the odds and they're not the outcomes. Right? They're not incarcerated. They're not addicted. They are handling any mental health issues that are still left unaddressed. They are being good parents. Their own children aren't going back into the system, because we know 50 to 80% of kids who are in foster care, their children will also be in the same system that affected them so negatively, right? And so when we look at those outcomes, I think we have to start defining success differently. And so there are, 13 years later, right, there are a lot of successes and youth that we've worked with and they're doing well. And they don't have to be doctors and lawyers and all of these things to be successful and to be happy and to be joyful and to feel like they belong in a healthy community, in a healthy environment. And so I think I hope that we start defining that differently, right? We stop putting so much pressure on foster kids and on our own kids to become these things and achieve these things for the sake of achievement and appearance.
Yeah, and believing that just, at 18 or 19 or even 20 years old is not the end of their story.
Right.
They may struggle for another 10 years.
Right.
But it doesn't mean, I have things in my life, people in my life that spoke things into my life 20 years ago that I recall still, that are meaningful and powerful for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So you don't know. I think sometimes we think we're it's like a fishing pole,
right?
And we have one hook down there, and we have one reel, and we're reeling in. But I think it might be more like a fishing net.
Yes.
Like that. There's like this net. Like everyone's holding on to a piece of the net.
Right.
And
right. Sometimes we're just the catalyst, right? We're the catalyst for change. We help.
Maybe we threw the net in.
Yes, that's right. We can help kids see that there's a different way. And, I think a part of our program is this question of belonging. We've done some legislative advocacy, and the question comes up, right? Why is it that these kids are so much more likely to be child sex trafficked and incarcerated? They call some of this the pipeline to prison, right? These kids, they've done this. The Juvenile Law Center came out with a stat that said, for kids with 5 or more placements, 90% of them will be involved in the justice system. And when I look at the kids, hundreds of kids over the years that I've met and talked with.
I'm surprised 10% get out.
Right. Well, I know very few who have fewer than 5 placements. Very, very few. I also know very few who don't have some kind of experience in the justice system in some way, mostly when they were juveniles, but some as adults. And so it's interesting that when we put them in these congregate care facilities, which theoretically are designed to help them become more stable so that they can go into a foster placement, and for reasons that are incredibly complex, it doesn't work out that way. So a lot of them just end up staying there until they age out at age 18. But when we look at why they do that, I kind of say, well, those are the only options for them to feel like they belong. Right. And so when we look at pimps and sex traffickers, and they're so good at making these kids feel like they're loved and like they belong, they can do that so easily, because I think that just speaks to what a sense of belonging they do not have. They don't feel like they belong. So it's so easy for them to do. And so I think one of the coolest things about our program is that we have these kids coming to church. And after they start coming there for a couple months, the people at the churches have been incredibly welcoming and encouraging. And I think they start to see that, hey, maybe I do belong here. Maybe I can fit in here. And changing the narrative that you can only belong in these unhealthy places. And I think that sort of sense of belonging is so it's powerful for all of us. But I think that's such a big thing. And not only being the catalyst for change and mentoring, but being the catalyst in allowing them to see that there are other places to belong and fit in and be authentically who you are, that are good and healthy. And so that's been a really neat thing to watch. In fact, we had one of the boys from one of the homes got really upset and he ran away. He didn't get very far, and they asked him where he was going, and he said, "I'm going to the church." So that was we don't ever want a kid to run away. But the fact that he felt like he could go there and get help and feel like he belonged there was really a powerful thing.
I think it's important that I know you're doing this, but unfortunately a lot of our churches are really uninformed when it comes to trauma. And so is that part of what you're doing? Because
it is. We actually have our trainings at our church, and we open those trainings up. So we let everybody in the church know. And so
you mean that like anyone at the church can come and attend?
Anyone can come. Whether you go to the church, a lot of times we'll send it out to other nonprofits, or whether you're going to be a mentor. We want and so we were are working with a child sex trafficking collaborative in Harris County that the Karen Purvis Institute kind of runs. And so a lot of times those trainers who are amazing will come over and run trainings for us. So we do open those up to anybody. And I remember one of the ladies at the church came, and at the end she came up to me and she said, Audra, I think every person in this church should have this training. And I said, hey, I agree. Because at the end of the day, I think it allows us to be more compassionate, because these kids are going to grow up to be adults, and they're the same adults that you see in the grocery store, or when you're somewhere and you see something, someone act in a way that you don't understand. Someone gets triggered and they flip their lid and they get angry, and we don't understand that. And so we think, man, that's just crazy. Why did they do that?
No, we add a lot more judgment to it than that.
We do. Yeah, we do. But when you've kind of been through this and you understand what some of these kids go through, and you can have compassion for and look at it in a way that says, man, I'm really sorry for whatever you must be going through that would cause you to react in that kind of a way, right? And we can look at it through a more compassionate lens, and a lens that says, hey, they're reverting to a survival behavior that served them at some point in their life, and I'm sad and I'm sorry that you haven't had the opportunity to heal so much from that, right?
No, it's so important. I'm so happy that you're doing that work. We should probably make every church. I wish I could. Oh, here, I want to fix something again. Here I go, confession.
No.
I'm Tara. I'm here to fix people.
No, I'm with you on that. I'm also with you on the, can we get every person on the planet?
Every person on the planet.
Yes.
Because no matter how much I know, I still struggle with it. So when we don't know, it's a really big struggle. Because churches can, while I hear you and I understand, but churches can feel like one of the most, places where you are least likely to be yourself.
Right. Yes,
you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so it's like there's this space that's what I believe the churches are for. But unfortunately they're not always. Right. So I'm thankful that we have some of that going on.
Right.
So anyway, let's see. I think, you know what? I think the light bulb that I had, it was huge for this. And I don't know, sometimes I have these big light bulbs and I'm like, I wonder if anybody listening had that same thought. But for me, I mean, I've already said it, but this was a huge takeaway. And it's the takeaway is that I'm not, the wanting to fix comes from this false sense of responsibility for somebody else that's not mine.
Yeah.
While I am a parent and I am responsible,
right.
There's only part of it that I'm responsible for, my part.
Yeah.
And so,
but it comes from a place of love, and I think that we all have it. But I think, like Adam said last time, right? We can't fix things for people. We can't, as much as we want something for someone else, we can't choose that. We can't fix that. And so I think for all of us, there is a part of just life and learning from those mistakes and what we don't get. I think for me anyway, the best methods of learning have come from me messing up and making a mistake, right? And if we don't do that, and we don't want our kids to go through that, we don't want them to feel pain, we don't want them to make a mistake that we know is avoidable, but sometimes that's where they learn. And so sometimes I think we, as hard as it is, have to just step back and say, I love you and I'm here for you, and I might not make that decision, but
I'll be with you when you fall.
That's right.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Man, okay, how can people get in contact with you? How can they learn about the Champion Project? We'll put all of this in the show notes, but give us the
awesome.
Quick
Thank
version
you.
of it.
We have a website, thechampionproject.org, and they can find out about it through that, or you're welcome to put my email address there.
Okay.
They can contact me, but
okay. And what you're doing in our area, it's Montgomery County, right? Are you Harris County, Montgomery County?
Both. Yeah,
okay.
We have homes in both. Yeah.
So just to reiterate my understanding and make sure everybody understands, you are partnering residential treatment centers
Yes.
with churches.
Right.
And you are training churches on trauma, specifically TBRI principles,
Yes.
right? To go in and be mentors.
That's correct.
To create, and you said something in the very beginning, and I was going to have you repeat it again, but it's based on a fact that you discovered about having one, say that again.
So there's been all kinds of research that say the best predictor of success for kids as they age out of foster care is the number of stable adult relationships they have.
Okay.
And so for so many of these kids, they just don't have the opportunity to have stable, consistent relationships with healthy adults. And so many of them don't just know basic relationship skills, and they're so used to, as soon as something goes wrong, there's kind of abandonment. And so just showing up and helping them work through things that they're going through is it's an incredible learning experience for them. And so often, we use this language, right? When a kid misbehaves, well, they should know better.
Yeah.
And so when we look at our kids, I would argue they don't know better. Right. Because what they've seen, they're repeating what they've seen. And we know it's unhealthy. But unless we can walk with them and help them see that there's a different way and a better way, we can't expect them to do different things. Right. And I think I also want to mention, this is kind of something that really helps mentors. When we look at kids from hard places, we look at them, their age chronologically. And developmentally, many of them are half that age. So if they're 16 chronologically, they're 8 developmentally. And so their brains are not working at the same level and capacity as an average 16-year-old kid, which, of course, we could get into that and what that means. But experientially, a lot of these kids are 35, 40. They've seen so much in their lives, but their brains aren't able to process it, and they don't know what to do with it. But we know that their brains can heal, that they can heal, and a big part of that healing comes with connection. And so if we can provide them the opportunity to connect with stable, caring adults, we can help them heal their brains. And so that's part of what we do. And we really walk with the church. It's groups, right? So smaller groups in a church that we connect with, support, walk them through the process, and we don't ever just kind of send them out and say, hey, you're on your own. And it is kind of just a large community of people that are doing that and talking about it, because it's tough work. It's intimidating work, but it's work that's incredibly worthwhile. Yeah.
And obviously for you, because you kept coming back now.
Yeah, it has changed my life in the best possible way. Yeah. I have learned so much about myself. I've learned so much about God and the way that God loves and pursues us through other kids. And I've just learned so much about hope and resiliency and possibility and potential. And it makes me incredibly sad to think that there are kids that might not have that option, because, you meet these kids and you see behaviors, but when you really talk to them, they're amazing kids that just need a chance. They just need a person. And that's so good. If we can help one, then...
then you did your work.
Yeah.
And you can feel good, and it's symbiotic, because you're taking away too. I always think that. It's like you get so much more when you give.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for sticking around to the very end. I hope your light bulbs went off like mine. I know I'm already thinking there are some people that I know would be great mentors for my daughters and would just love the opportunity. And so I'm going to be investigating that this week. And I think it's a new way of thinking for me, is to think I don't have to do everything, because I'm not really good at everything, and that's okay. So I'm going to be seeking out some of these young people in my life that I think would just be super excited to mentor my daughters. And anyway, I'll keep you posted on that. So have a great week. Don't forget to scroll down to the bottom, hit follow. You'll be the first to get notifications on new podcasts. I would love it if you would leave a 5-star rating and write a review. That always that helps us to get more guests. It helps people to know what it is we're talking about here and the ways that it's helped you. And it helps encourage me, to be quite honest. So thank you for that in advance, and we'll see you next week.
Mama's well.
Yes, she is.